have chosen to focus on the most. Just really concentrate on that particular area when I come to it. So before we get into our sleeping, exercise, eating, let's look at why we should need to take care of our self-care. Why bother? So life really is about the yin and yang between loss and new experiences. So in life, it's often both and. In other words, we can experience loss and life at the same time, and we can hold them equally in our lives in that way. It's the yin and yang of life. And Rumi, the famous poet, I think put it absolutely brilliantly in just this short phrase. And he just said once, both light and shadow are the dance of love. I just love that because I think it really encapsulates what I'm trying to say. Because society often wants us to put both feet in one camp. They want us to just be on one side only. And you're seeing that playing out in politics, particularly these days. But life itself always has a duality about it. So I believe that we as childless community can each hold loss and life at the same time, holding those two opposing feelings together at the same time. Some people call it the design of the universe or the uncertainty principle at its best. And if you think about it, just think about someone you love, right? There must have been occasions when you hated them at the same time. There must have been. I know I've certainly felt that way. So there's a good example right there. There's that duality playing out of holding two opposing feelings at the same time. And sometimes that duality can get forgotten by individuals in a group of people who've suffered a common trauma. So one example I was thinking of in particular is the Jewish community who survived the trauma of the Holocaust. And research was actually done on it, and they found that there were two types of people in that group. There were those who felt they just didn't die, i.e., people who had just focused on their loss that they'd experienced during the Holocaust. And then the second group were those who came back to life post-Holocaust, meaning like people who actively chose to bring new experiences into their lives whilst also remembering their trauma. So in other words, there were those who were being alive and there were those who were feeling alive. And research has since confirmed the reality of this idea of this dual split in a group of people who shared the same trauma. And they've also found out that this applies to all groups, every single group who've suffered from any common trauma, as we have here in our community, where we've all either dealt with or we're in the midst of dealing with the trauma of being childless, not by choice, or childless by circumstance. So my view is this, that being playful and imaginative is a fabulous way to feel alive again, to embrace new experiences. And my strong belief is that beginning to take care of our self-care, see, I'm coming round eventually, to take care of our health and well-being, it's definitely playful and it's definitely imaginative. So in this way, we'll be tapping into that idea of coming back to life. And I have to say that this, in my journey of being childless, has been an absolute game changer for me. And this is why I'm devoted to health and well-being as a form of effective healing for everyone. Now, you might be thinking, hang on a minute, I think Lauren's being a little bit overly confident about this idea of taking care of our self-care as a way of feeling alive again. But there is growing conversation in the therapy world to back up what I'm saying. And yes, it's really helpful and healing to deal with the grief trauma of being childless. It helps us find meaning in the trauma and its long-lasting legacy. And I am with that completely. I'm a trainee counsellor after all. But there's also an idea that creating new experiences that bring you joy and hope is in itself equally healing. And it's even considered now by some therapists as a necessary bolt-on to any grief therapy to help people like truly move forward in their lives. And very recently, the British Heart Foundation, they carried out research on those who've been heartbroken by events in their lives. It is an actual physical condition. It's called takotsubo, which is a Japanese word. And it's a physical condition that occurs it doesn't happen often, but it is there as a physical condition when stress and a troubled mind affect the heart, and it causes symptoms that can actually mimic a heart attack. So a group of patients that had all suffered from Takotsubo, they were divided into 3 groups, and they were each given different treatments. So one group were given CBT therapy sessions, one group were given an exercise routine to follow, and the third group were just given standard care, i.e. heart medication. And guess what? The groups that fared the best were the ones that underwent therapy and the ones who were given an exercise routine. So hopefully I've given you some food for thought here, that taking care of our self-care can be an effective way to heal from our trauma of being childless. So let's get stuck in. Let's finally look at one of the first of our 3 areas, sleep. Why do we need to care about sleep? Well, if nothing else, we spend about 1/3 of our lives doing it. And surely that's a good enough reason in itself to look at improving the quality of our sleep. There are roughly 4 stages to falling asleep, and the 4th stage is the deepest one, and it's known as REM, rapid eye movement. Now, this 4th stage, this deep sleep part, that's the most physiologically profound stage. So it's when human growth hormones are released for repair. It's when the waste products are dealt with to get flushed away. It's when tissues are repaired and regrown. It's when the immune system is strengthened. So sleep restores our body and it restores our mind. And I was just thinking about this the other day, that there can be this sort of societal influence where it's almost a badge of honor to tell someone that you've had very little sleep and then claim that you're perfectly fine the next day. And many of us might be guilty of having worn that particular badge. I know I did when I was younger. But you can see from how I was describing the effects of the deep sleep that the body and mind are not perfectly fine in any healthy way through lack of sleep. So let's look at the negatives of a bad night's sleep. And I thought I'd choose Homer Simpson here as an ambassador of the effects of bad sleep, if you like. And he's not exactly a model of someone who fits the mold of good sleep. And you can see all around him the effects of that. So mentally and cognitively, it can affect our stress. It can affect our anxiety levels. It can also affect our cognitive skills, such as concentration. Also, appetite-wise, it can play havoc with our appetite hormones, and it results in us eating more than we actually need to. It can also mess up with our hormone levels, particularly testosterone, which obviously impacts on both men and women. But let me underline the effects of poor sleep in another way. Like if you've ever watched those films where people are tortured through sleep deprivation, you'll understand some of the impacts on our minds and our bodies. So prolonged sleep deprivation is really an insidious form of torture because it attacks the deep biological functions at the very core of a person's mental and physical health. Yeah, it's less overtly violent than cutting off someone's finger as a means of torture, but it can be far more damaging and painful if it's pushed to extremes. So it's really important that we get good quality sleep. Let's have a look at who our enemies of sleep can be. So I'm looking at our bedroom environment here. So number 1, noise. That could be internally in your where you live, or it can come from the outside. Our bedroom might be quite cluttered. We've got the wrong ambient temperature. It's either too hot or too cold, or our bed is really uncomfortable. And yes, these enemies of sleep, they're pretty obvious, aren't they? But I thought it was still worth pointing them out, because sometimes we can become unconscious of our immediate environment, and therefore we can forget that we can actually make positive changes just there in our immediate environment. You know, it's like putting up a brand new painting or a print on a wall in your home. First of all, we notice it every time we go into that room, but then at some point we no longer notice it. We forget to look at it as a work of art and enjoy it. So I'm just inviting you just to become aware once more of your bedroom environment, is there anything that you could improve on there? If you've got a notebook with you, you might want to jot something down so that you remember. Other enemies that we can look at, stress is a biggie. So it can cause us to have difficulties in falling asleep. It can give us interrupted sleep, restless sleep, or even just shorter length of sleep. So that's one area where we're affected. Another one is caffeine, which caffeine has a half-life of about 5 hours, which means that the caffeine stays in our system for a good while. So that can cause us to have poor quality sleep. Alcohol is another one. Now, some people think, oh no, I get a better night's sleep when I've had a glass of wine or two, but the science says otherwise. And moderate consumption can impair your sleep quality by as much as 24%. And then if you've had a high alcohol consumption the night before, that can impair your sleep by up to 40%. Another potential enemy is our gut health. It's not an obvious one, I know, but diet and meal times can affect the microbial circadian rhythm. So what that means is that our gut garden has its own daily cycle as well as our body having its own daily cycle. And that can all affect our sleep. And finally, the medical term nocturia, which basically means having to get up to wee. All these can be enemies of our sleep. So let's move on to the more positive side then. Who are our friends of sleep? Well, firstly, we can do practical things like having blackout curtains, an eye mask, a comfortable bed. Did you know the average lifespan of a mattress? Well, it's 7 to 10 years, but often we don't even think about like how often we've changed our mattress, do we? Hotels change their mattresses every 3 to 5 years because they're very aware that a happy hotel guest is one who's had a good night's sleep. So maybe that needs to be something that you could look at. There's sleep apps now galore. So there's headspace.com, there's happier.com, there's loads of them out there, but they're all really good at actually getting you to sleep, calming you down, giving you that downtime that you need to prepare for sleep. Another suggestion is sound stimulation, which some people are less aware of, but it essentially means listening to sounds to get you to sleep and then having the sound on whilst you sleep. It's often better to have it right throughout the night. And research has shown that having that sound continuing throughout gives your night's sleep. It works best that way. And there are different coloured noises. You've probably heard of white noise, but there's pink noise, there's brown noise. So currently there's not that much research on the effects of brown noise on sleep for me to feel comfortable to talk about that. So I'll just stick to white and pink for now. But with white, that contains all the frequencies found in the spectrum of sounds that you can hear in equal parts. It's often called broadband noise. And white noise uses a mix of sound frequencies to create this sort of static-like sound. And it's best for general sleep improvement. A recent study found that 38% of people fell asleep faster whilst they were listening to white noise. So if you have trouble getting to sleep in the first place, this might be something you could look at. Having white noise also helps with sound masking because it reduces the difference between the background hum and then loud jarring noises that might jolt you out of sleep, like a door slamming or car horn honking, someone snoring even. So it may help you to fall asleep faster and then keep you in a deep sleep for longer, which is what we want for that rejuvenation. Pink noise uses deeper sounds and lower sound waves. So you might prefer that kind of sound to hear it. It's sometimes people think it's gentler and more soothing because it's got that lower pitch than white noise. There isn't much research yet on exactly how pink noise works and how well it helps you to sleep. But one research study said that it lowered brain activity and that then led to more stable sleep. So whichever coloured noise you may want to try, regular exposure to that sound stimulation during sleep, it creates a kind of Pavlovian response in your brain, so that over time your nervous system begins to associate the sound with the sleeping, making it easier just to fall asleep and stay asleep when you've got that familiar audio cue. And finally, studies have shown that consistent, predictable sounds like white noise can help reduce cortisol, which is our stress hormone, again, promoting a more relaxed state, which is much more conducive to a deep sleep. I think the key here that I want to sort of emphasize on sound stimulation is just finding the right type and the volume that works for you and your environment. The most important factor is consistency, because your brain thrives on routine. So a reliable audio environment can become a powerful sleep friend. And there's quite a lot on the market if you research it. There's headbands where you can hear the white noise. There's machines that you can put in your bedroom. There's loads of YouTube noise clips that you can use. So that's sound stimulation. Another one is walking first thing in the morning. Now, remember I was telling you earlier about your circadian rhythm, the pattern your body follows based on a 24-hour day. It's like your body's internal clock, if you like. Well, that walking first thing in the morning helps reset that circadian rhythm. And the circadian rhythm, in turn, tells your body when to sleep and when to wake up, and therefore helps you sleep. Blocking blue light at night is always a good thing in my book, because blue light trips your body clock up because it suppresses melatonin, which is the hormone that reminds your body it's bedtime. So ideally, avoid screen use 2 to 4 hours before bed. But if that is not your lifestyle, you could always switch the backlight of your device from blue to orange light, and there's loads of apps that do that for you. So there's things like Screen Shader, Windows Nightlight, Night Shift. There's loads that you can look up. Also, another aid to that is just if you're reading and you can get these orange glasses, they're not prescription glasses, but they're orange glasses that cut out the blue light. Wear those when you're looking at a device. And finally, you can even have warm light in your bedroom. Believe it or not, there are light bulbs out there that block blue light out. Again, so if you've got your light on, it's cutting out that blue light for you and helping you get to sleep better. Having regular routines for a wind down, that downturn into I've had my day now and now I'm looking towards sleep, that really helps to get routines going regularly so that your body and your mind become aware, now we're going into sleep mode. And finally, write down any to-dos. So some of us have really busy minds and we're lying there in bed and it's like, oh, I have to do this, and it's all very, very busy up there. Just have a notepad by your bedside table and put it on the paper, because once it's on the paper, it's out of your head. And people find that really helpful. So over to you guys now. So looking at sleep, what is one thing that you could do to help yourself improve your quality of sleep? You might have had another idea apart from the ones that I've suggested, but I'd love to hear from you in the chat. Anything that you can think of that you want to do. So someone said we use our Alexa to play all kinds of sounds for free. Oh, there you go. Alexa, yes. Why hadn't I thought of that? That's very good. Sad, or as you call it, happy lamp every morning. Yes. Very good. Yes, for seasonal affective disorder as well. Morning walks, excellent. Yeah, someone said about the notebook by the bed helps a lot. Someone's looking into getting a new mattress, excellent, and blocking the blue light. And another one's about doing the bedtime routine, yeah, and putting that into place early enough so that you can get a decent length of sleep as well, instead of binge watching. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Someone else has said writing things down before going to bed really helps. Wonderful. Natural material blackout blinds, perfect. God, that's brilliant. You've all got some ideas there, so that's great. Fabulous. Let's move on to the next area, which is moving, exercise. So in the 1950s, it was always considered cool to smoke a cigarette, wasn't it? And then by the 1970s, we all realized it wasn't so cool and it was definitely not healthy for us. And so there was this realization. In that same vein, scientists now are realizing that sitting is really not good for us. And that's why this phrase has been bandied around for the last couple of years about sitting is the new smoking. And if you think about it, we sit a lot. So if we have a desk job, we're probably sitting. When we're eating, we're sitting. When we're watching telly, we're sitting. When we're looking at social media, we're probably sitting. When we travel, we're probably sitting. There's lots of sitting going on, and we are sedentary, more than we have ever been before. And scientists are realizing that this is having a terrible effect on our health and well-being. So I'm going to shock you by telling you some statistics that they shocked me anyway. So the first one is this: sitting for 6 to 8 hours a day is the equivalent of 20 cigarettes. I mean, like, words beg a belief, don't they? 20 cigarettes just by sitting 6 to 8 hours a day. Another shocking statistic: sitting for over 6 hours daily increases the risk of premature death by nearly 20%. That's a huge hike. And the last shock: sitting for more than 10 hours a day increases the risk of death by heart failure 40%. So I'm going to leave those horrible statistics with you to start thinking about why it's so important to move and exercise. Let's have a look at activity styles and how often. So people, it's kind of hard to know, like, how much do we exercise? What kind of exercise do we supposed to be doing? And it doesn't all have to be done in one go. You can spread exercise and moving evenly over like 4 to 5 days a week, or even every day if you like. So the World Health Organization's weekly recommendation is 2.5 hours of moderate activity, or if you're going to go for vigorous activity, you can halve that to 1.25 hours a week. Plus, they recommend that you do muscle strengthening twice a week. And you, as I said earlier, you reduce the time spent sitting or lying down and break up long periods of not moving with some kind of activity. So let's delve into this a bit more. So what counts as moderate activity, that 2.5 hours a week? Well, this is what it will look like. It'll raise your heart rate. It just makes you breathe faster. You feel warmer. One way to tell if you're working at a moderate intensity level is if you can still talk, but you can use your voice to sing. Not that you'd probably want to try that, but that's kind of like the yardstick. And examples of moderate intensity activities include brisk walking, water aerobics, riding a bike, dancing, even pushing a lawnmower. That's moderate activity, hiking. So that's moderate. Vigorous, which is the one where you can halve the amount of time you spend exercise if you do vigorous activity, 1.25 hours a week. That activity just makes you breathe hard and fast. And if you're working at that level, you wouldn't be able to say more than a few words without pausing for breath. And obviously, most moderate activities can translate upwards to becoming vigorous if you just increase your effort. So things that are vigorous are things like running, swimming, riding a bike fast or up hills, walking up the stairs, team sports like football, netball, rugby, hockey, that kind of thing. So that's vigorous. But then there's very vigorous, which alternatively is known as high intensity interval training. And that's where exercises are performed in like short bursts of maximum effort, and then they're broken up with a rest. So examples there are lifting heavy weights, circuit training, sprinting up hills, interval running, spinning classes, that kind of thing. And finally, looking at activities that strengthen your muscles, which is the thing to do at least 2 days a week. That should be done to the point where you need a short rest just before you repeat the activities. So things like yoga, Pilates, Tai Chi, lifting weights again, working with resistant bands, or just doing any exercise that you're using your own body weight, such as push-ups, sit-ups, heavy gardening, that counts as strengthening your muscles. Carrying heavy shopping bags, that counts too. So hopefully from that, you've got a better idea of what kind of exercise you should be doing on a weekly basis. So let's look now, why is it that we don't exercise then? Well, most of the reason, or most of that, is because we justify why we don't. And here I've listed many of the discomforts I've heard people say and blame on why they can't exercise or won't exercise. I'm including myself in here. So I'm curious to know, which discomforts can you relate to? If you just put in the chat the number against which objection. So what is it that you say to yourself just to justify not exercising? You say, well, I would exercise, but. So in my case, for instance, I'd say I'd be number 5. Well, I would exercise, but I hate it when my hair gets messed up, and that's why I don't swim. So what's your number? What justification do you give for not exercising? Oh, we've got 2 here, 9 and 10. Yes, I was going to say there might be more than one. Yeah, we've got I hate sweating. Number 6, I hate sore muscles. Probably number 10, I hate going out at night when it's dark and cold. Yeah, absolutely, with you there. Yeah. Number 9, I hate getting out of bed when it's dark and cold. Someone said none of those. It's fatigue or the need help to mobilize. Yes, absolutely. Cool. So now maybe we're a little bit more aware of what justifications we give ourselves for not exercising. But let's look a little bit more about why that might happen. So why? We all know exercise is good for us, don't we? And then in the same breath, we say things like, well, we don't exercise because ... So there's a bit of a puzzling contradiction going on there. Well, any observer of human behavior, they'll tell us that immediate experience often outweighs future rewards. So in other words, it's hard to do something uncomfortable, even if we know that it's going to earn us something good later. And I think personally that there's another layer to this. I think that in the modern Western world, we live in a society where we are so used to comfort. So we keep our indoor temperature in our homes adjusted to perfection all year round. We wear thick-soled shoes so that we don't harm our feet when we're walking outside. We shower and bath in warm water. We have lots of ways of keeping comfortable. And all of this first world pampering, it kind of gives us a certain intolerance to even mild physical discomfort. So my view is this, that maybe it isn't so much that exercise isn't too uncomfortable. Maybe it's much more that our everyday lives are a little too comfortable. So knowing our typical human behavior, now might be a time that we could stop justifying why we don't and start thinking about how we can. So what is a great way to get over this hump of resistance, this not liking the initial discomfort, even though we know it's going to do us good in the future? Well, the answer is quite simple. Find something you enjoy. Ta-da! That's it. That's my solution. So if you love the outdoors, try walking, hiking, cycling. If you love dancing, go to dance classes or do a cardio dance class. Equally, if you hate running, Don't do the running, do something else instead that you do enjoy. There are so many workouts out there that you can choose from, so many ways to exercise and move that can help meet your health and well-being goals and that you won't dread doing. If you're not sure, you can even experiment for a while, see what you like and what you don't like. The point is here that regular exercise will provide you more health benefits than doing kind of a spurt at something and then go, oh, no, I don't like that. Choosing something you enjoy will help with that sustainability, that regularity of doing the exercises and keep on doing them. So over to you now. What could you slot easily into your life for your weekly exercise? Something you know you'll enjoy. And I'd love again to hear about that in the chat. And if ideas are kind of eluding you right now, maybe think of the sports and exercises you loved doing as a kid. That might direct you somewhere. There might be something that you used to do that you loved and you'd even forgotten that you loved doing it. So it'd be great to hear your thoughts in the chat. So I'll give a wee pause again and have a look at that until we move on to our final area, eating. So let's have a look at the chat again. Ooh. Loved roller skating. Yeah, roller skating. Walking somewhere green. I used to love tennis. I started badminton again. Excellent. High intensity training and walks in the forest. Brilliant. Yeah, walking out in nature. I love that. That's what actually makes me walk. I can't do those treadmill things. Can't do them. They're just too boring for me. But get me out in nature and I'll just keep on walking. So yeah, that's brilliant. Pilates, singing, dancing, excellent. Badminton. Yeah. Fab. So it looks like you've come up with some ideas about how you can do an exercise that you actually enjoy, because that way you'll stick to it. Okay, let's move on to the last area, but not least, eating. And I want to talk today specifically about blood sugar balancing. Now let's look at what it's not. It's not a here today, gone tomorrow fad diet. It really isn't. It's been around for a long time. It's only starting to gain traction quite recently, but it has been around for a while. It's not a calorie counting exercise and it's not mind-bogglingly complicated. It really isn't. So let's have a look at what it is. So it's not a diet as such, but it's a way to regulate your body through what you eat. And it's a way of eating so that the glucose levels in our blood stay as steady as possible. They'll never be completely like that if you look at it on a graph. They'll be like a lovely little wave, if you like. Our aim is to have it looking as calm as possible rather than having it all spiked where a high level of glucose gets into your bloodstreams, because it's those spikes that cause the damage to our bodies. So it's about consciously choosing food and drink options. And it prevents that seesaw of that blood sugar spikes and crashes, if you like. Now, of course, there's always going to be that story of like a woman who lived to 113. She ate nothing but processed food. She drank alcohol. She smoked 40 cigarettes a day. But honestly, she's an outlier. The body will adapt. We are really good at adapting to situations, but the body will also keep the score. And honestly, there's no cheating. There's no getting away with unhealthy eating without the body eventually reacting at some point. Blood sugar balancing is a way to take the pressure off that body being forced to adapt and having to expend energy on making those adaptations. And then that in turn helps to maintain a more steady blood glucose level. And that in turn helps us to feel less fatigue. We are much less irritable. And ironically, we often feel less hungry. So that, in brief, is blood sugar balancing. I'm going to come on to some more details in a wee while. So sometimes people say to me, well, yeah, but like what blood sugar balancing, who's it actually for? It's probably not for me because I'm not diabetic. But it's a myth that diabetics need to be concerned with their blood sugar levels. It's valuable for everyone, and it's valuable for everyone at all stages in our lives. It does not matter. So let's look at the science behind it a bit. So this pretty visual kind of shows you what happens to the carbohydrates that we eat. So just to recap, food containing mostly carbohydrates, things like bread, rice, pasta, potatoes, cakes, sweets, some vegetables and some fruit. So looking at this, during digestion, the carbs break down into simple sugars. They then get absorbed into the bloodstream as glucose. The glucose gets sent to the body's cells where it's needed by our hormone insulin. And the cells use the glucose as fuel because eating is about a source of fuel, essentially. And the glucose that is not used for fuel is stored for later use as fat. So that is the science behind blood sugar balancing. But you may have noticed that I've only talked about carbohydrates here. And that's precisely because proteins, fats, fibers do not affect blood sugar balancing levels at all, not in and of themselves. They do contribute, which I'll talk about in a little bit, but only carbohydrates are the ones that get converted to glucose, and they're the ones that cause the blood sugar spiking. Proteins, fats, and fibers, what they do is they slow down the digestion, they slow down the absorption of carbohydrates and ultimately glucose, which that in turn will prevent these glucose spikes and keep blood sugar levels stable, which is what we want. So that's the science behind blood sugar balancing. Let's look at why these spikes matter. Why do we worry about them so much? Well, there's several effects of a blood sugar spike, but all of the effects are to create toxins. And I think of these toxins like these space invaders. Do you remember space invaders years ago? So when glucose is delivered way too quickly into our cells, our bodies respond in several ways, but all of those ways ultimately create these space invader toxins, if you like. So one way is that free radicals get released. And if too many free radicals are released, they really become bad boys because they damage anything that they come into contact with. They can even change our DNA and they can make holes in our cell membranes. They're really nasty things. Another result of how our body reacts to too much glucose is another space invader toxin is creating, which is made up of the glucose, but it binds to things like protein in our body and it forms harmful molecules. So all of these toxins, like free radicals, that leads to oxidative stress, which I haven't got time to go into today, glycation, all of these contribute to various health issues such as aging, cancer, and chronic diseases. And all of these space invader toxins are, of course, they're considered enemies by our bodies. So naturally, what happens? Our bodies go into protection mode. And what's one of the main ways our bodies try to protect itself against these space invader toxins? Well, this, ladies and gentlemen, is one of the main ways our bodies try to protect and defend against those invaders: inflammation. Now, inflammation in and of itself is a great form of protection and defense, but it's when that inflammation becomes chronic, that's when the problems start, and that's when our own bodies turn against ourselves. So externally, chronic inflammation looks like redness, it looks like swelling, and internally, chronic inflammation looks like tissue and organ damage. So you can see the effects on our health and well-being just from this image. It's not a pretty picture, I'm sure you'll agree. And even the World Health Organization said in 2018, inflammation-based diseases are the greatest threat to human health. I'm going to repeat that because I think it's really impactful. inflammation-based diseases are the greatest threat to human health. And sadly, the stats seem to back that up too. So currently, 60% of people worldwide will die of an inflammation-based disease. So chronic inflammation is really not helpful for us at all. There's other things about why spikes matter, and sadly, time doesn't permit me to go into more detail here, but blood sugar, I just wanted to mention these, that blood sugar spikes can also be responsible for us feeling hungry, like getting hunger pangs quite often. It can be responsible for our food cravings. It can get us feeling tired. It can also impact our sleep, and we can have a bad night's sleep. So now I've told you the downside of blood sugar spiking. Let's look at what we can do to just flatten those spikes out, to have less of that peak and crash of blood sugar levels. So I've got 3 tips for you here. The first one is never have carbs as Billy No mates. Now, what do I mean by that? So it's wise from a blood sugar balancing perspective to not just eat carbs on their own. So do you remember I told you that proteins, fats, and fibers just slow down that digestion and absorption of glucose into the bloodstream? So what we do is we can use that to our advantage by not eating carbs on their own. Therefore, my phrase, avoid your carbs being Billy No mates. So eat protein with it, eat fats with it, have vegetables with it for the fiber. Just have something else with your carbs. And the other trick is the actual order in which we eat the food when we have a meal. That can have a profound effect on sugar spiking. So ideally, we want to eat vegetables first because of the fiber in them. And what happens essentially is the fiber creates like a mesh in our stomach lining, and then that stops the glucose molecules from just traveling into the bloodstream really quickly. It kind of curtails the speed. Or you can have a starter as well as your main meal that's some kind of vegetable, salad, crudités. That's another workaround. The next order, so you've done your veg. The next one is to eat the proteins and fats. Again, all in the name of slowing down the glucose from entering the bloodstream too quickly. And then finally, get to eat your carbs because you've laid the foundations for a slower absorption. And, when you think about it, it's no coincidence we have a dessert after our main meal rather than the other way around. So that's trick number 1. Number 2 is move after eating. Now, at the risk of you thinking I'm sneakily trying to get you to move, the science bears out the gains of this, of moving after we've eaten. Honest, it does. So if we eat carbs, our body muscles will happily take up that excess glucose as it arrives in our blood that's going to be used for moving, thereby flattening out our blood sugar levels. And moving after eating has the added bonus of reducing the likelihood of weight gain and avoiding energy slumps. So how much do we have to do? Well, actually, it's not a lot. So just doing 10 to 20 minutes of walking or 10 minutes of some kind of resistance training, that will do the trick really nicely. And the time span from eating to when you do the exercise is roughly about 70 minutes after eating. That's the most effective time for moving. Now, for the skeptics amongst you, I would invite you to try out this test. So number 1, eat a carb and just stay sitting. And number 2, eat carbs and then walk for 10 to 20 minutes within that 70-minute time frame. And then for each action, just rate and make a note of your general mood, your energy levels, and your hunger levels over the next few hours. And my guess is you'll notice a tangible difference between those 2 actions. So that's trick number 2, move after eating. And the final trick is water. Obviously, I'm talking about, when I say drink and then drink some more, I'm talking about water. And to be more accurate, we need to drink about 2 litres of it every day. Obviously, it depends on your body size and how often you exercise, but roughly speaking, that's a good yardstick to use, 2 litres. And the reason that I say about, you're thinking, well, what's water got to do with blood sugar balancing? Is because if we get dehydrated, that can result in a hormone-driven rise in blood sugar. So nothing to do with what you're actually eating or not eating. The hormones kick in and give a rise in your blood sugar levels. So that's one reason to have water. Secondly, kidneys play a large part in regulating blood sugar. So drinking water just helps the kidneys. It flushes out excess sugar and it does it through your urine. So that's another reason for having water. So using a reusable water bottle means you can easily drink water in any setting. So you've got it with you, whether you're just running errands, you're at home, you're at work. And obviously it's an effective way to track how much water we're drinking on a daily basis. It's very difficult for our brains to imagine what 2 litres of water actually looks like otherwise. And obviously keeping a water bottle handy can serve as a visual reminder to drink more water. If you see it on your desk or your table, you're much more likely to take a gulp, aren't you? And finally, another way to get you to drink more water is linking that in with some kind of thing that you do on a daily basis, some routine that you do. So if that is not the case for you, you can even set an alarm on your mobile, just at regular intervals, just to remind you to drink water, just take a gulp. And you'll only need to do that until you get into the habit of drinking more water. So that's my last tip and trick for blood sugar balancing. So as you've guessed by now, I'm going to go over to you. And in the chat, I'd love to hear what you think you could do to help your blood sugar balancing. Zoe says, so interesting. I feel that. And now I can say to carers, see, I was right. Dehydration, blood sugar spike. Yeah, good for you. You go, girl. You tell them. So drink more water has come up for one of you. Brilliant. That's an easy thing to integrate. Eat less chocolate, drink more water, move more. Perfect. Well done. Eat carbs last. That's really useful if you can. It's funny, like how we used to having like if you think of a traditional meal as like meat and 2 veg, how we used to just like mixy and matching. So it might take a bit of a while to think, well, I've got to eat my veg first, then my proteins and fats, and finally my carbs. But it kind of works. And sometimes it's not possible to do in certain meals. Walk after eating, brilliant. More exercise, more excuse. Is that Freudian slip there? More exercise after eating. I do try and have a walk after lunch anyway, drink water. Yes, like having lunch. There's that like famous afternoon slump, isn't there? If you're ever doing like a seminar in the afternoons, the poor old facilitator suffers from that, I think, with their participants. So excellent. Looks like you've got some good ideas there. That's great. So let's just pull it all in now and let's just have a summary. What are the 3 things, or if you've just got 1 or 2 chosen areas, what are you going to start putting into place for your sleeping, exercise, eating, and or kind of thing? Just make a mental note or jot it down for yourself. What are you going to start doing? Because here's the best way to get things done. Are you ready? You just begin, just like start it. That's how you do things. Now, if you're feeling a bit stuck as to what 3 steps you can take, maybe ask yourself this question, like, what parts of myself am I not allowing into my creation that deep down I truly desire to allow? That question might unlock something for you. May not, but so what parts of myself am I not allowing into my creation that deep down I truly desire to allow? And if doing all three steps in one go, like, as of tomorrow, I'm going to do this, 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 if that seems overwhelming to you, fear not. Just start with one of them tomorrow. Then add the next one in a week later, and then add another one in a week after that. The thing is here, it's about small actions, repeating those daily, and that accumulates extraordinary results. It's about consistency. It really is. So that concludes my little kind of blurb about sleeping, exercise, and eating. And now I would love to bring Elaine back. And she's going to talk about her sort of lived experience, if you like, of, well, there you are. Hello again. So welcome back. And we're just going to chat about, how things were for you really in the case studies, because we had the privilege and the luxury of looking at all three areas, didn't we, with you?
Yeah.
So tell me about your sleep first, like looking at that quality of sleep. What was one thing you did that helps that?
Well, for me, I had a really stressful job. So I was coming home from work really stressed. I live on my own, so I didn't have anyone to offload to. So I was going to bed hyped up, stressed. I always felt like I was rushing to bed and I've got to sleep and I've got to sleep now. I'd get into bed and I'd start, the old doom scrolling on my phone. Before
Yes,
you know it, a
that's
few
me.
hours had gone past.
Yeah.
And I just sort of realised that actually wasn't helping me at all. And if anything, it was feeding into my anxiety.
Mhm.
Um, so on the back of that, we were able to see that I needed some wind down time and just a bit of calmness before I went to sleep.
Mhm.
So it was a question of us looking at a wind down routine that worked for me. So now when I get home after work, I do whatever I need to do to be ready for work the next day, make sure my uniform's ready, my lunch is ready for the next day. I make sure I have some dinner. And then once that's done, the rest of the time is my time to do whatever I need to do. And then what I've done as well, and I've got Alexa that goes off every evening and just tells me that it's time for me to wind down, ready for bed. And that for me is my cue to put my phone away, turn my laptop off, and it just gives me some time just to wind down so I'm not quite as stimulated before I go to sleep.
Yeah, I think that's important, that downtime, isn't it? It's like a shift, isn't it? Like, that's it now. My day's more or less over, and now I need to think about sleep. And it's kind of giving value to that, isn't it?
Yeah, and I don't manage well later at night. I love going to bed early. And that made me feel like I was lazy or not coping. So now Alexa giving me my reminder is my permission that it's okay, I can go to bed now,
Yeah.
and now I can relax. I'm not being lazy. It is just going to make my sleep better.
Mm, absolutely. So what's been the differences, like sort of pre looking at sleep and post looking at sleep? What's been your main improvement, would you say, or the thing that struck you the most?
Well, obviously, I've always slept, and it feels like I slept a lot. But I always woke up really, really tired and just
Mm.
absolutely exhausted. So I guess the quality of my sleep wasn't brilliant. Um, and as I said before, my sleep always seemed really rushed. I felt like a lot of pressure to get to sleep as quick as I could, so that I got as much in as possible before my alarm went off the next morning. I was like panicking to sleep.
Mm.
Um, I noticed how my mood and my ability to cope with the day is really strongly linked with my sleep. So I couldn't function so well if I'm tired.
Mhm.
I get physical symptoms. I get really hot. I feel sick. My emotions are all over the place if I'm tired. I burst into tears at the drop of a hat and just feel generally more emotional. Um, Personally as well, I don't feel quite as coordinated when I'm tired. I bump into things, I trip over things, and my ability to cope just goes out the window. So
Mm.
everything just seems so much more hard work and makes me stressed. So now when Alexa goes off, I have permission to end my day rather than fighting to stay awake. I
Yeah.
might watch TV in bed, but I'm resting and winding down.
Yeah.
I am still tired in the mornings when my alarm goes off, but I don't have that feeling of exhaustion and, oh, I can't face the day. That's gone. Um, I have changed my job and I am in a less stressful job now, but it's a completely new job for me. It's not something I've ever done before. So it's been really exhausting and stressful getting to grips with it. But I've done it. I didn't think I was employable anymore, but I have done it and I'm able to focus better, have more energy. And I do think my sleep pattern, and the quality of my sleep has contributed to that.
Yeah. Brilliant. Brilliant. I love that description you had about like you lying in the bed, because I've done that. You're lying in the bed and you're going, I must get to sleep, I must get to sleep, quick, quick, because I've got to get the hours in for my sleep so that I've had a proper night's sleep. And of course, it's completely self-defeating, isn't it?
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, that's great. Thank you for that. And like moving on to the exercise side of things now, how have you succeeded in incorporating exercise into your week? Like, how's that played out for you?
So before my hysterectomy, I was really quite active. I was jogging, I was a Zumba instructor, I was at the gym. Um, but because I was thrown straight into the menopause, I do get very painful joints.
Mm.
And just with my grief as well, I couldn't be bothered. But I wanted to go back to being more active, but it was, oh, I haven't got time, I'm too stressed, I'm too tired. So it was just that we were able to look at what would work for me. And personally, I'm too tired after work to go out for a walk or do whatever. So we had to look and see when it would work for me. Um, I'd come home and think, oh, I'll go for a walk. And my joints are more painful at the end of the day. So I'd stop walking and then I felt like I failed. And then I spiraled, feeling, more down, feeling even worse about myself. So we just looked at, perhaps I've got more energy in the morning. So once my alarm goes off, I'm going to work anyway. So twice a week, I just set my alarm an hour earlier. And it is difficult. Um, but I know if I get up and get out, I will actually feel better for it, and I do about 45, 50 minutes walk before
Mm.
work.
Mm.
But on some days I wake up and I think, oh, my joints are too sore today. I can't do that. Um, so I've learned, to be kinder to myself on those days, and rather than beat myself up and just say, well, you couldn't do that, could you? I just say it's okay. I can't do this today, but I will do it another day. And I think it was looking at finding something that I'd enjoy as well.
There you go.
So I
That's
know we
the
spoke about
same,
that,
yeah.
and I wanted to go to aquasize.
Mm.
And it was just the encouragement to go along and do something I wanted to do.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's that like you say, you wake up in the morning sometimes go, "Ugh," and it's that going back to that thing about discomfort. We're just thinking, reward now equals I'd rather stay in bed sometimes, but now you've experienced the benefits of for you for walking, and that's starting to override that, oh no, I'll just turn the alarm off and go back to sleep. Yeah.
Yeah, I come back from my walk and I, blitz the kitchen and get in the shower, wash my hair. I'm ready for work.
Yeah.
Because I wouldn't do that on a normal day. But
Yeah.
I'm tired. I don't want to do that. So it just gives me more energy.
Yeah. So now it's sort of become much more a part of your life with your morning walks, going to exercise. What's your best feeling that you have about exercise now that you didn't have before?
We had that conversation, didn't we? It's really weird.
Mm.
I say smiling.
Yes. Oh, yeah, she did say that. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, so I would go out for a walk and my joints would hurt. So I'd feel really quite miserable with myself and
Mm.
yeah, I'll just sit on the
And I
sofa.
remember we talked about the exercise. You were a bit hesitant, weren't you? Because about going on your own.
Mhm.
Um,
I
so
was major hesitant.
yeah,
Yeah.
tell us about that.
Um, it was something I wanted to do, but I was scared of turning up on my own.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I had the things going around my head, well, I'm going to be the fattest person in the group. Everyone will be looking at me. So we spoke about doing a small step first, and that was just going along to the sports centre and talking to someone about it. So I made myself drive there after work one day and just went and spoke to one of the receptionists. And she was so lovely. And she's like, actually, people are looking at the instructor, they're listening to the music, they're not looking at you, they're just there to have some fun themselves.
Yeah.
So she said, oh, it's a good class tonight. I was like, oh, really? Oh, well, strike while the iron's hot. And so I signed up and I went along, and actually, the majority of people were on their own. And I certainly wasn't the biggest person in the group, and no one was watching.
There you go. See, like
Yeah,
we often have these kind of ideas in our head, don't we? That we just think we think it's going to be one way, and it actually turns out to be something else. Yeah.
yeah. And now I've started talking to people when I
Yeah.
go to the group. So it sort of, widens your horizons as well.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. Brilliant. So, thank you for that. So, just moving on to blood sugar balancing now, because I remember when I first told you about it, you were a little bit like, I don't know if that works. So, do you remember um, your breakfast consisted of fat-free yogurt? And I suggested, like tentatively, that maybe you could go to full-fat yogurt, and you were thinking, "Oh my God, what's she saying to me?" Um, so tell us about your eating and drinking regime now. What's been the biggest change for you to make?
Well, I lost 5.5 stone previously.
Mm.
Um, then had my hysterectomy and my childless grief hit, and I admittedly ate and drank all my feelings, and all the weight went back on. Um, and with my ADHD diagnosis, in the mornings, I'm not great. I find it really difficult to coordinate myself. So yeah, I was having fruit, yogurt with some Weetabix, but I couldn't coordinate doing that. Um, but yeah, I have gone on to full fat yogurt, and it's much nicer. It's much more creamier. It's lovely. Um, and I'm not sure there's one big change that I've done that's made all the difference. I think I've done like lots of little changes,
Mm.
but because I can't coordinate in the mornings, I'd be leaving for work rushed, stressed, just trying to make some breakfast. But now I do overnight oats, and they've been a complete game changer.
Mm.
So at the weekend, I make up 4 or 5 lots of overnight oats, which last, and I can put them in the fridge. So I put my fruit in, my yogurt, my oats. I've gone over to almond milk, which I never have thought about, but actually prefer it. And then in the mornings, it's good to go. They're all in a jar. All I need is my spoon, eat and go to work. So I'm
Also,
leaving work, leaving for work a lot less stressed and a lot less
yeah.
rushed.
Yes, exactly. And there's that added benefit. So, like before, you were, people. There's this real thing that cereal is good for you at breakfast time. But when you think about it, what is it? Mainly carbs. And what did I say about carbs and being
Mhm.
Billy No Mates? Whereas at least with your oats, you're mixing it with the fruit. You're mixing it with a full fat yogurt. So you're just like doing that slower absorption of the glucose. Then so
Yeah.
that's brilliant. Okay. And then we looked at tracking for you, like, I know we can like go into overdrive with tracking everything that we do in our lives, but what was the benefit of tracking what you eat and then your related moods to that? What was the biggest benefit for you on that?
So we looked at what I was eating
Mm.
and often why I was eating it and when I was eating it. So I could notice that if I was tired, I'd go for something sweet like chocolate, thinking it was a quick fix, really. So it was highlighted what I was actually eating. Um, and it was a mood and food diary. So I could see how my mood changed during the day. But it had tick boxes at the end. So it was, have I had good quality protein? Tick. Have I had no or reduced alcohol? Tick. 7 portions of fruit and veg, tick. And then the last one was, have I drunk 2 litres of water? Well, I'm a nurse, so I know the importance of it. But, for years, I think I've drunk probably a maximum of 1 litre a day. And so for me, be able to say, no, I haven't drunk that, it just highlighted what I was doing and what I wasn't doing. So I have actually increased my water and I religiously have my 2 litres now. And I'm not as hungry. Um, I'm not getting any cravings for sweet stuff anymore. I think I've got more energy.
Yeah,
Yeah, no,
yeah,
it's had lots of benefits.
yeah, absolutely. Okay, that's great. And just to end on a kind of no, I was going to ask you what you think about the 80-20 rule. So, for those of you who don't know what the 80-20 rule is, it's basically saying take care of your health 80% of the time, but allow yourself 20% for living, because a lot of our social lives revolves around food, particularly, doesn't it? Food and drink. We celebrate birthdays with massive cake. So the 80-20 rule is kind of giving you a permission slip to not be perfect 100% of the time. And it's okay as long as roughly 80% of the time, you're eating much more healthily and you're exercising and you're sleeping better. All good, all good. So, how did that help you, knowing the 80-20 rule?
As you say, we all have days where we're not 100% on it. So
Yeah.
then I don't feel so guilty. I don't, get the whip out then and think, well, you've mucked it all up. It gives me flexibility when I've been away. So I've been away this weekend, and I haven't been on it. That's absolutely fine. I don't
You're in
feel
your
bad.
20 zone.
Yeah, I know that when I get home later today, I'll be back on it. I've had a great time at the weekend. I've eaten and drunk what I wanted to, and tomorrow I'm back to it because I'm actually starting to feel a bit yucky again. Um,
Oh,
I just
interesting.
feel I need some more water and get some good veg inside me as well.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Elaine. Thank you for being so willing to share your experience, and
No, thank
um,
you.
and thank you for staying behind, because I know you've been away for the weekend and you've held back your return journey just so you could be on this webinar. So thank you so much for doing that. I really appreciate it, and doing that with with love. Thank you, thank you. So that wraps it up. So thank you so much for being here today, and we haven't had a chance to look at if there's any Q&As. Let me just see if I can work that out. Can't guarantee. No, can't see anything. So yeah. So thank you all so much. And does Steph come back at this point? I don't know what